Developing the knight initiates flexible control over central squares, hinting at a potential queen's Indian or ready setup. Mirroring white's development, this equalizing thrust secures central influence and prepares for flexible pawn structures. d4 boldly claims central space, preparing to develop pieces harmoniously and restrict black's options. Challenging the center immediately creates dynamic imbalances and demands precise piece play. Boldly challenging the central pawns, white invites a sharp queenside pawn battle, aiming to seize more space. Opening the central fight, this capture immediately sharpens the positional battle for key squares. Recapturing here opens diagonals for white's bishops and claims central space efficiently. Opening the e-file offers scope for bishops and prepares development. Solidifying the center and preparing for rapid development, white anchors the knight and opens a diagonal for the queen. Developing the knight to c6 neatly reinforces the d4 pawn and prepares for queenside pawn expansion, aiming to equalize piece activity. Developing the bishop to a square that supports the central pawn and prepares for kingside castling, while maintaining flexibility. Breaking the center open with d5 immediately challenges white's pawn structure and aims for dynamic counterplay. Castling securely anchors the king, preparing to join the fight for central control and unleash the rooks. Developing the bishop to a central square prepares for castling and frees the c8 square for a rook, aiming to control the open c-file. Solidifying the queenside and preparing a slow build-up, this pawn advance aims to support the central structure. Securing the monarch is paramount. Now focus on developing the queenside and controlling the center. Releasing central tension, this captures create a more open structure and immediately challenges black's king's safety. Liberating the bishop and centralizing the knight creates dynamic counterplay. Reclaiming the pawn opens central lines for the white queen, aiming for rapid development and potential kingside pressure. Unifying queenside pieces, this develops the queen to a central active square, preparing for an eventual d5 pawn push and supporting knight development. Developing the bishop to a square where it eyes black's queenside, while supporting the central pawns, is a good positional choice. Sacrificing the bishop to expose the king's pawn shield creates immediate attacking chances. Clearing the back rank for safety, a crucial defensive maneuver given the open lines around the monarch. The rook now eyes the central files, adding pressure and preparing to join the queenside assault. Securing the c-file initiates a direct confrontation for control, pressuring black's queenside while preparing for active piece play. Shifting the queen to b8 defends the pawn on c7 and prepares for potential counterplay along the b-file, while simultaneously creating an escape square for the king. Unleashing the queen here creates immediate pressure on the kingside, but also exposes it to potential counterplay along the d-file. This knight repositions defensively, eyeing the vulnerable king and preparing to support a central pawn push later. Unlocking the queenside, white maneuvers to contest the c-file and bolster kingside pressure. Reclaiming central space is key, but opening the e-file could invite trouble if white's queen shifts effectively. An aggressive push to seize the initiative, opening lines and potentially creating attacking chances against the black king. Sacrificing the bishop here opens lines for the queen, but critically weakens black's kingside pawn structure for a pawn. Reclaiming the pawn with the bishop reestablishes piece equality and opens a path for potential counterplay on the kingside. Reorganizing the queen to a more active square prepares for potential counterplay along the d-file. White seeks to unravel black's queenside pawn structure by exploiting the open c-file and potentially launching an attack on the king. Unpinning the queen allows for more active piece play, though it leaves the kingside slightly exposed. The rook surges forward, establishing a tenacious outpost and challenging the black queen's comfort zone. Reconnecting the bishop to the queenside now aims to reinforce the pawns against white's pressure. Snatching the pawn offers a temporary material gain but isolates the rook, potentially becoming a target. A bold centralization of the knight, directly challenging white's rook and aiming to disrupt their coordination. Asserting control over the open c-file solidifies white's pressure and aims to restrict black's pieces. Launching a pawn offensive, black dramatically opens lines, but exposing the king might be a dangerous gamble. Shifting the queen to the h-file aims to exploit any lingering weaknesses around the black king. Reclaiming control of the c-file, this forces white to reconsider their aggressive piece placement. Reclaiming the crucial open file now is a decisive step. Abandoning the rook frees the knight, seeking active counterplay in a suddenly open position. Recapturing the rook decisively reclaims material parity and opens the c-file for further pressure. Shifting the queen to attack the b3 pawn creates immediate tactical ripples and repositions for a potential kingside sortie. Sacrificing the rook to pry open the kingside and activate the queen is white's bold gambit. Reclaiming the rook opens lines, but the exposed white king might become a tempting target. Solidifying the central square with the bishop now prevents any immediate counterplay and builds pressure on black's weakened queenside structure. Bolstering the queenside pawn chain offers a vital defense against white's invasive rook. Seeking to untangle white's pieces, aiming for freer piece activity, and hoping to prepare an advance or maneuver. Black decisively seizes the open file, aiming to dismantle white's centralized pieces and prepare for an aggressive follow-up. Consolidating the king's safety on a central square avoids immediate threats and prepares for a potential counterplay. Gambiting material for active piece play is a bold but precarious choice given the current board setup. Securing the rook's influence along the 7th rank, while simultaneously preparing for potential exchanges and consolidating the king's safety. Solidifying the pawn chain, this maneuver aims to prevent the queen's intrusion and bolster defenses, though it does leave the kingside slightly weakened. A calculated retreat to safeguard the king, setting up a potential queenside defense. Reinforcing the kingside pawn structure is paramount now, as that doubled rook pawn on the 7th rank offers little protection. Unleashing a potent check, white aims to shatter black's defensive structure and exploit the exposed king. Protecting the king from further exposure becomes paramount, as the open files are now a serious concern. Securing the central d-file for future pressure, this stabilizes white's position while preparing for a potential queenside advance. Unleashing pawns forward creates dynamic chaos, but leaves your king dangerously exposed. Re-establishing central control aims to restrict black's bishop activity and prepare a potential kingside attack. Opening the queen to raid the weakened kingside, aiming to exploit the exposed monarch. Unleashing pawns to gain space, yet risking exposure of your own monarch to a determined queen. Sacrificing material to expose the enemy king is a bold gambit, aiming for a swift checkmate before material deficit becomes fatal. Securing the isolated pawn with the queen while preparing to hunt the enemy king. Accepting this forced exchange now opens lines, potentially creating chaos for white's king. A decisive exchange that simplifies into a king hunt, where white's monarch will become a formidable attacking piece. Securing the rook on the 7th rank offers a strong defensive post, preparing for potential counterplay down the open file. Centralizing the bishop offers greater scope for defense and potential counterplay. Pushing this pawn forward aims to create queenside space and perhaps weaken white's pawn structure in the long run. Expanding on the queenside offers a crucial outpost for the rook, aiming to penetrate black's weakened defenses. This pawn advance aims to free the bishop and potentially create mating threats by opening lines towards the white king. Pushing the b-pawn here aims to restrict black's central pawn advances and create potential queenside space. A desperate attempt to create mating chaos with a pawn sacrifice, but the king is surprisingly safe now. Shifting the king to safety offers respite from the looming pawn advance, preparing to reinforce the queenside defenses. Pushing this pawn forces the white king to a perilous square, opening critical attacking lanes.